Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you come in today. Thank you for your patience as we were transitioning from one session to the next. So glad to have you all here. We're going to get ready to get started. I do want to introduce Ms. Sara Martin from The Ohio State University. Those of you who participated in our conference in August, she was one of our presenters. She presented on our last PD in November, our last professional development today. She has a wealth of information to bring to you all. So I'm not going to belabor our time. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Miss Sara does ask that you all hold questions until the end unless she's asking specifically for questions, and then you can also put them in the chat. Thanks, Sara, for being here today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to talk about positive reinforcement. And again, I'm Sara Martin. I study special education at The Ohio State University. So just a little bit about me. I'm currently a PhD student in my first year of my PhD program. This will be my third degree from Ohio State University, so I'm very familiar with Ohio State. I'm a former teacher. I taught special education for students with moderate to severe disabilities for 6 years. And here's my name.number, martin.4388. I can be reached at that name.number at osu.edu. I will also provide my email on the last slide if you have any questions following the presentation. So I like to start my presentations with an advanced organizer that kind of goes through what we are going to talk about today. So today we're going to talk about positive reinforcement. We're going to discuss what it is, how we use it, or why we use it, how we can use it. We're going to talk through several examples of positive reinforcement. We're going to start with praise and talk more specifically about behavior-specific praise. We're going to talk about the PREMAC principle, which is a really fancy word for a first then strategy. And then if we have time, we'll talk about a mystery motivator. And then finally, we'll go over some tips and tricks for general positive reinforcement strategies. So first, I'm going to go ahead and start with a video that goes through an example of positive reinforcement from the Big Bang Theory.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you with.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
No, I
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and stop that there. So like they mentioned, they were using chocolate as positive reinforcement for what they considered as correct or good behavior. A lot of times in schools, it's difficult to use things like chocolate. I know not all students can have snacks and different types of candies. That is one option, but we're going to go through lots of other options that you can use with your students in the classroom. So first, what is positive reinforcement? Positive reinforcement is the contingent, so depending on a behavior, presentation of a stimulus or something following a response that increases the probability or rate of that response. So it's adding something that makes that behavior more likely to occur in the future. The consequence itself is the positive reinforcement, and it's a consequence that increases the future rate or probability of a response when presented immediately after that response. Consequence usually gets like a negative connotation, but when we're talking about positive reinforcement, we're talking about antecedent behavior consequence. So the consequence is what happens directly after that behavior. So if the consequence is something that increases the future rate of that behavior, it's considered something that is used as positive reinforcement. And positive reinforcement is essential to improving behavior. So here's a picture example of positive reinforcement. So the child's desired behavior is making the bed. Their reward is either a verbal good job or a sticker chart is what this looks like. So every time the child makes the bed, immediately after the child makes that bed, they receive either a sticker or some of that positive reinforcement or reward. And then more of the desired behavior is likely to occur in the future. So the child will make their bed more often in the future. So why do we use positive reinforcement? It helps to create a positive classroom environment. Positive reinforcement is important in preventing student problem behavior and supporting academic achievement. And how a teacher responds to students can set the tone for the classroom. So using positive reinforcement just helps to set a more positive classroom environment and a positive tone for the classroom. How do we use positive reinforcement? Like I mentioned in the third slide, when we went over what we're going to talk about today, there's many ways you can use positive reinforcement in the classroom. We're going to go over several today. The first we're going to talk about is praise, and we're going to dive deeper into behavior-specific praise. Then we're going to talk about the PREMAC principle, which again is kind of a fancy word. They call it grandmother's rule or a first then strategy. And then if we have time, we'll go through mystery motivator. A lot of these can be used whole class, small group, individually. So they're great strategies to use in any type of setting that you may be working in. So positive reinforcement looks different for everyone. Kind of like I mentioned with the video, not all students like or can have candy and chips, but that is one option of positive reinforcement. It could be a type of food. It could be a type of activity. If a student likes to dance, if a student likes to jump. I know a very popular one in recent years is playing on the iPad or playing on technology or a device. So that's another activity that can be used as positive reinforcement. They can be things like compliments, which is another word for praise. So things like good job or you did it. Again, we're going to get a little bit deeper into behavior-specific praise and what that might look like. They could be actions. Such as, this might not be something you use in the classroom, but something you might use with your own children is like tickles or a high five or a thumbs up, something that you do that they can visually see. It might be a type of sound like music or funny voices. I know in the past I've had students who really liked different characters, so maybe even like role playing as those characters can be used as positive reinforcement. Along with foods, it might be a specific drink like soda or milkshake. It might be a certain scent, like access to like the smell of like a lotion or coffee or some sort of scent that someone likes. It might be as simple as an item like stickers or electronics. It could be people. So we all know students sometimes have their favorite peers, their favorite teachers. It could be access to those kinds of people. Or it could just be an internal feeling, like positive reinforcement can be when they learn a new skill or when they met a goal. So there are lots of ways we can use positive reinforcement. And again, it looks different for every individual. If you want to go ahead and share some things maybe that you've used in the past with students in the chat as we continue on to talk about praise, and we can look at some of those later on in the presentation. So praise, what is it? Praise is a positive statement by the teacher or adult working with the student that is contingent or dependent upon a behavior that indicates approval or satisfaction of that behavior. It's a teacher-initiated or professional-initiated statement that conveys to the students the specific academic or social behaviors in which the teachers would like to see the students continue to engage. A lot of times throughout this presentation, I'll use the word teacher. That really applies to anyone who is working with a student in the classroom. So next, we're going to go through an example of praise.
Ways to praise a student. It is often natural to praise a student by saying, "Great job," or "You are so smart." Instead of giving vague praise or praising a student's intelligence, consider praising their efforts. This will help a student develop a growth mindset, which helps them learn that they can improve and achieve their goals. Here's Sped Exchange's list of statements you can use to praise a student. You tried really hard on that. I'm very proud of the choice you made. I appreciate how helpful you were. Even though it was hard, you never gave up. You are a great friend. You did a great job helping. That was very brave of you. What a creative solution. You are so responsible. You solved the problem in such a creative way. I like that you weren't afraid of a challenge. You thought of that all by yourself. I can tell you tried your very best. I am proud of that. You did a great job participating today. You handled that situation very well. The next time you praise a student, don't forget to try one of the statements from Sped Exchange's list.
All right, so those are just several examples of how we can use praise in the classroom. Going back, I checked the chat while that video was playing, and I like a lot of the things that we put in the chat for what can serve as positive reinforcement. Lots of snacks, PBIS coins, or whatever your school uses for like their PBIS system. A sticker chart is great. Lunch with me, that's definitely something that I used a lot. That's really personal or personality dependent if you're willing to give up your lunch, but that's something that students really enjoyed. A point system is great. Electronics are always great. Breaks, so frequent breaks are great. Thumbs up. Walks with staff is a big one, just to get some movement in. Stickers, pencils, sensory breaks. Offer to see what their accomplishment is. Yes, these are all great extra playtimes. Class Dojo has great built-in positive reinforcement strategies. So thank you for sharing. Those are all really great ways that we can use positive reinforcement. So let's keep going ahead and talking a little bit about praise. So why do we use praise? Hold on, I lost my screen. Okay, so why do we use praise? In addition to creating a positive classroom environment, praise is a way to give students feedback and promote positive student-teacher interactions. The more we're praising our students, the more positive interactions we're having with our students, and that only adds to help build the rapport and help build those positive relationships we have with our students. They also lead to positive outcomes for both social and academic behaviors. So we can praise not only for things that are happening in the classroom, but also things that are happening socially with that student, maybe even outside the classroom. So how do we use praise? So again, effective praise is contingent on student behavior. It depends on the student's behavior. A recommended ratio of praise to reprimands is 4-to-1. So anytime we're correcting or reprimanding a student, we want to make sure we're praising that student more often. That again helps to build those positive relationships. Something I always like to do was 2 positives and a negative. So I know that's a little less than that 4-to-1, but sometimes it's really hard in the moment to think of 4 things that we want to praise a student for. So making sure you're at least praising them more than you're reprimanding them. It's nice too to start with those things. So I like, for instance, if a student is sitting and working on a task, I love how you were sitting. I love how you began the task. Let's say they didn't complete it. Next time, I really want you to sit there and work through this class until this task until completion. So making sure you're telling them what you liked, what they did before you're giving them that reprimand is very helpful when it comes to praise. And then you can use the I feed mnemonic to guide your use of praise. So making sure that praise is immediate, that it occurs right after that student behavior that you want to reinforce. The more immediate it is, the more helpful it is for students to know that that is what the behavior that you want to increase. You want it to be frequent. So again, making sure you're using it often and more often than you're reprimanding the student. You want to be enthusiastic. So a student is going to respond better when you use praise like, great job working through that assignment, instead of just saying, good job and moving on. Making sure you make eye contact with the student so they know that the praise is directed towards them. Making sure you describe the behavior. That goes into that specific piece. If you are actually describing what you liked that the student does, that helps them to know what behavior was being praised and what they want you to increase in the future. And then variety. Make sure you're using a variety of praise statements. The word good job is easy to use, but it can get pretty boring for a student after a while, and it kind of loses its reinforcement power if you're using the same phrase over and over again. So making sure you're varying those phrases and using different things like great job, or I like how you did this, or you did an awesome job on your assignment. Just using different praise statements with the same student is very helpful. So in order to increase your use of praise, consider these steps. First, identify a time or activity when students are exhibiting challenging behaviors, such as being off task or being non-compliant. You can record this time period. If that's allowed, that's normally something you have to get permission from the parents, but you can audio or videotape this time period, or you can just kind of keep a note. If you keep a tally mark next to you during that time period, and just quickly tally the measure of the quantity of your praise. So you could just tally how many times you're praising, and you can go back and you can look at like the quality of your praise. So you can evaluate your praise in terms of like how often you were praising. Were you giving general praise, so just good jobs, or were you being more specific, so describing the behavior in your praise? Equity, making sure that all of the students you work with are receiving praise. I definitely know that in the classroom, there can be some students that are sometimes more challenging than others. So it may be hard to find times to praise those students. So making sure that you're praising all of the students that you work with, and making sure the praise is appropriate for developmental levels. So you want to make sure the praise is easy for the child to understand. So then once you evaluate your praise, you want to then go ahead and set a personal goal to increase the frequency, or how often, and the quality, or how well you are giving that praise. Then sometimes it's really helpful to make a list of praise statements that can be used with students who have the most challenging behaviors or who receive the lowest amounts of praise to use as part of your goal. So coming up with some of these phrases ahead of time, kind of just having a list of them, will help you to not have to come up with those in the moment. Because I know sometimes it's very hard when things are moving quickly in the classroom and when you're working on a lot of different skills in the classroom to come up with phrases in the moment. So having kind of like a list of phrases is very helpful. And then make sure you implement it and evaluate. So try out using some of these praise statements with your students and see how you did. You can go back to evaluating just like in step 2. So making sure you're checking how often you're using it, the type, if it's general or specific, the equity, if you're using it with all of the students you work with, and if they are able to understand or it's appropriate for their developmental levels. So next, we're going to watch a little bit of a video about praise as an overview.
Welcome. During this video, we're going to learn about behavior-specific praise. Sounds good, right? Let's start off with a definition of behavior-specific praise. In order to do that, we need to recognize that there are 2 types of praise statements or feedback used in schools: general praise and behavior-specific praise. Behavior-specific praise provides learners with specific, positive verbal feedback indicating the approval of social or academic behavior. It is an evidence-based classroom management strategy that improves learner behavior by letting the learner know what they are doing to meet the behavioral expectations. It is easily incorporated into any instructional setting. It is a non-intrusive way to reinforce specific behaviors of your students. It can be differentiated based on the age of the students, the setting within which you teach, and your school's culture. On the other hand, general praise statements, such as well done or thank you, while positive, do not provide the learner with specific information about the behavior. Let's take a look at an example. Anita is sitting quietly listening to the teacher. An example of behavior-specific praise would be, Anita, thank you for looking at me. However, if the feedback was, good job, this would be a general praise statement, as Anita, the learner, does not specifically know which behavior the teacher is referencing. Increasing behavior-specific praise has been demonstrated to have a positive impact on the classroom environment. It is associated with increases in social and academic performance of students, decreases in disruptions in the classroom, and increases in academic engaged time. Behavior-specific praise can be deceptively simple. It seems like it is something that should be happening on a regular basis in schools. However, in a 2017 study, Scott, Hearn, and Cooper conducted 6,752 observations in pre-K through high school settings, including alternative settings. And they found that the rate of behavior-specific praise was at a rate of 0.007 per minute at the elementary level, 0.004 at the middle school level, and 0.005 at the high school level, less than once per minute at all grade levels. The good news is that there's room for improvement. So what can we do to achieve the improvement? There are a few simple steps to plan, implement, and monitor your increased use of behavior-specific praise. First, determine your present rate of behavior-specific praise. This is typically done by recording your number of behavior-specific praise statements during a short period of teacher-directed instruction, perhaps for 10 or 15 minutes. You will keep track of the behavior-specific praise statements directed towards individual students or the entire class. This can be done by recording the number of behavior-specific praise statements by making a tally mark on a paper, using a golf counter, or using a frequency counting app on your phone. The National PBIS Center released an app called Be Positive. Among other features, you can use the counter feature for a frequency count. The rate of behavior-specific praise can be calculated by adding all of the occurrences together and dividing by the number of minutes of instruction that you observed. This will give you a rate per minute. The goal is to have 3 to 5 data points that you can graph prior to starting your plan. This will be your baseline data. Next, you will develop a plan that includes a specific, measurable, and observable goal. You will also create a self-management plan to increase your behavior-specific praise. Basically, what steps are you going to take to accomplish your goal? Write these steps down. Then, you follow your plan, continuing to collect data to monitor the impact and adjust your plan as needed, depending on how you are doing in relation to your goal. These same steps could be accomplished with consultation from an instructional coach or colleague with whom you work. Having someone to provide you with additional input and suggestions may strengthen your planning and outcomes. Now that we've unpacked behavior-specific praise, talked about why it is important, and discussed ideas of how to increase behavior-specific praise in your classroom, you have 3 additional tasks. First, individually or as a group,
Sarah, you're muted.
Oh, wow. You might have lost a lot of weight.
Thank you about that. So can everyone see my PowerPoint now?
Yes, we can see it. We can hear you.
Awesome, thank you.
I can hear you. I don't see it.
Let me make sure I'm sharing.
If
Okay,
you can everyone see and hear Sarah? Okay.
I
Ms.
can
Hay,
hear it. Everything.
can you see her? Can you see her screen as well?
The behavior-specific praise?
Yes.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay, thank you all so much.
yes, thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so I like that video because it gives an overview of how you can self-monitor your use of praise and kind of make sure that you're working towards increasing that. Like they said, it was happening at the middle, elementary, and high school level less than 1 time per minute. It would be really great if it was happening at least 1 time per minute. So increasing that and making sure you're monitoring your use of praise. It also leads us into our next part of the presentation, which is focusing on behavior-specific praise. So behavior-specific praise, what is it? It's a praise statement plus identifying the behavior that you are praising. So defining that behavior that you're praising. So for instance, if a student just completed a math problem, you might say, great job, 2 + 2 is 4. Or if a student in class is participating by raising their hand, you can say, awesome work raising your hand. It's a type of praise that helps students learn what positive behaviors look like and feel like, and increases the likelihood that students will engage in those behaviors in the future. Again, like they said in the video, when you're using more general praise, the student's not exactly sure. The student could be sitting quietly. They could be looking at the teacher. They may raise their hand. When you just say good job, you could be praising any of those behaviors, but making sure you're using that specific behavior increases the likelihood that they will use that specific behavior in the future. So behavior-specific praise includes 3 components: a description of a positive social or academic behavior, specific identification of the student or group engaging in the positive behavior, and the use of an authentic, positive, and warm tone of voice. So again, if you're working with an individual, just making sure you're making eye contact with that individual. If you're working with a small group, you can identify that student by using their name or pointing at them and saying, you did a great job completing this assignment. Or I love how you're sitting quietly and looking at me. Or a lot of times, like in a small reading group, I really like how you're using your finger to read along while your classmates are reading aloud. All of those things help you to identify the student, describe the behavior, the positive social or academic behavior that you want the student to be using, and making sure you're using that authentic, positive, and warm tone of voice. All right. So here are some behavior-specific praise examples. I'm just going to go ahead and show one for now due to time, and then maybe if there's more time, we can show more at the end. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and show the elementary example.
Specific praise, elementary school, example and non-example. Mrs. D has worked with her class on how to write a friendly letter, including how to appropriately head such a letter. Samantha often struggles with writing tasks. In this example, the teacher uses behavior-specific praise to acknowledge that Samantha correctly heads the top of her friendly letter. Note how Mrs. D states the student's name and then specifically describes her behavior.
So today what we are going to do is we are going to begin to write a letter to our teacher. So if you would please begin the proper heading with the date and the name in the corner of your paper. Samantha, thank you so much. That looks awesome. Thank you for heading your paper appropriately.
To review, the teacher implemented behavior-specific praise correctly. She stated the student's name and delivered praise specific to the student's behavior. In this non-example, when
So that was an
Samantha correctly
example
adds a heading
where she used the student's name. She thanked her and said how much she liked that she was using the appropriate heading. And if you notice, when she was done walking away from that student, the student was smiling. So it made the student feel good, which hopefully increases the likelihood of that student's behavior of using the correct heading in the future. And again, she used that in a whole class setting, which can be challenging at times, but it was still possible. So again, we can use this in a whole class setting, in a small group setting, or individually with the students we work with. So now we're going to go through a non-example. So something that would not be considered behavior-specific praise.
to her letter. Mrs. D responds by providing praise. However, the praise she delivers is not behavior-specific.
So today what we are going to do is we are going to begin to write a letter to our teacher. So if you would please begin the proper heading with the date and the name in the corner of your paper.
To review, although Mrs. D provided nonverbal reinforcement, another form of positive feedback and one Samantha clearly appreciated, the praise technically was not behavior-specific because it did not include the student's name and did not specify the behavior.
So again, Even in the non-example, praise is effective. So don't feel like if you're forgetting to use that behavior specific praise that you're not doing a great job. Any type of praise is going to make a student feel good and is appropriate. However, behavior specific praise kind of takes it to that next step and helps the student learn from that praise. However, all praise is powerful, whether you're using general praise or specific praise. That specific praise just adds that extra step of helping the student to actually learn and hopefully increasing the use of that behavior in the future. So why do we use behavior specific praise? It informs the student of what successful classroom behaviors are while providing them with that positive attention. A lot of times attention is reinforcing to a student in and of itself. So when you're using praise, behavior specific praise, you're telling them what they are doing that's successful, and you're also giving them that positive attention. So it's kind of like a double reinforcer for them. You're also repeating and reinforcing the correct answer, so they know they were correct and they're further learning from the question that was asked to them or the task that was given to them. When you're providing that in the moment phrase to students, both the student receiving the praise and their peers learn to identify the positive behaviors. So especially in a small group or a whole class setting, when you're praising a student, not only are they hearing and learning from that praise, but other peers around them and in the classroom also see that and can learn from that behavior. When students see examples of what those behaviors look like and they receive positive reinforcement, they are much more likely to engage in those positive behaviors again. So again, that behavior specific phrase really helps to increase the likelihood of those positive behaviors again. All right, and we've gone through a few examples, so I'm going to go ahead and skip on to the next slide. If we have time, we can go back and look at some of these. So how do we use behavior specific praise? First, you want to set classroom expectations. So before delivering your praise, it's definitely important that you set the activity or classroom expectations for the student. So for example, if students are expected to listen closely to their classmates' presentations, you want to make sure that you lay out that groundwork in advance so that the students know what the appropriate behavior you are expecting is. You want to give that praise immediately. So praise is given after that expected behavior occurs, and it must be contingent or dependent upon that positive behavior. So for example, if Joaquin uses a new vocabulary word in a sentence, the teacher should immediately provide praise so that Joaquin and his peers can identify the positive behavior. So right when they use that new vocabulary word, you want to provide that praise immediately after so they know what behavior is positive. You want to make sure you're identifying the student by their name. So if individually, this isn't as important, even though I know when people praise me and they use my name, that makes me feel good. Some people just like when you use their name. So even if you're working individually, this is not a bad step to implement, but not as necessary as if you were working with like a small group or a whole group or a whole class. But it's important that you identify the student or the group of students. So if maybe it's a small group within that class, making sure you're identifying them by name. Instead of providing vague feedback for any student, for example, like don't touch him, make sure you identify which students are performing the appropriate behavior. So you could instead, by saying don't touch him to a student, you could say, thank you for keeping your hands to yourself, Anna. Because again, if someone is not keeping their hands to themselves and they see you praising a student who is, that will hopefully help to increase the behavior of keeping your hands to yourself for all the students in the classroom in the future. Make sure you're specific. Praise should be explicit feedback about the positive behavior. So for example, Allie, thank you for lining up quickly and quietly. General praise like good job or nice work is useful. Research has shown that it's not as effective as specific phrase when it comes to reinforcing positive behavior. Specific phrase is more likely to increase that positive behavior in the future. So to serve more as positive reinforcement. And make sure you're authentic. Giving genuine praise is key. When you provide praise, you really mean it, and you want the student to know that you mean it. Praise should be given for behaviors that are important or valued by your school and community or by the teachers in the classroom. Instead of saying, you guys are awesome, a teacher could give praise that aligns with the school's values of showing respect. So something like, Great job listening to your classmates' responses, everyone. You were showing me what it means to be respectful. So in that case, that teacher would be praising the entire class, which is something you can use behavior-specific praise for as well. Next, we're going to go through a little activity with behavior-specific praise.
Hello, educators. Welcome back. Today we're going to practice how to give behavior-specific praise. You may or may not be asking yourself, but how do I give behavior-specific praise? 1. Identify the student or group. 2. Include a term of praise. 3. Describe or acknowledge the specific behavior or rule being recognized. 4. Link the praise to school-wide PBIS expectations. And 5, if you like, provide a tangible reward. The idea is to provide the praise right away and do it with the intention of highlighting what our student did right. You probably do a great job of noticing positive behavior already, but verbalizing the specific praise and tying it into your PBIS expectations takes some practice. Let's give it a try. Oh, just a reminder, PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Support. After each example, you'll have time to reflect. When you see this screen, you can pause after you see the prompt. Let's begin. Arrival. What is a specific comment you could make to a student demonstrating the PBIS expectation for arrival?
So if you want to go ahead and share in the chat, those students were walking off of the bus and arriving to school. If you want to go ahead and share in the chat, what might be a specific comment or praise statement that you could make to one of those children to reinforce the behavior of getting off of the bus and arriving at school? Awesome. So I'm liking a lot of these. I love your walking feet. That's something I definitely noticed. They were all walking and not pushing or shoving. They were all giving each other space. Great. I love how specific you guys are being. This is awesome. Even just as simple as thank you for coming to school today. For some of our students, it's a big challenge just getting there. So just thanking them for being there and showing that you care that they're there is great. Walking in quietly. Keeping your hands to yourself. Great. These are all excellent examples of how you can be specific. So not only are you saying that praise statement of thank you or glad to see you today, great to see you, great job. You're including things like, I like how you walked off quietly. I liked how you stayed in a line. Those are all great examples of behavior specific praise. I'm going to go ahead and do 1 or 2 more examples. But go ahead and keep sharing in the chat. Those are great.
Learning in class. What is a specific comment you could make to a student demonstrating the PBIS expectation for doing their work in class?
So those students were working in class. If you want to go ahead and share in the chat what might be a specific comment or specific praise that you could give a student who was working in class. Good. Thank you for raising your hand. I like the way you raised your hand and waited to be called on. Thank you for listening quietly. Great job staying focused and keeping to yourself and working on your assignment. These are all great. You're naming the behavior that you want them to increase, and you're also giving them that praise statement. And I like how we're varying our praise statements. We're saying things like, great job, thank you, I like how you're doing this. These are all great examples. All right, we're going to go ahead and do one more.
Following expectations for using technology. What is a specific comment you can make to a student demonstrating the PBIS expectation for using technology?
So go ahead and share what you saw for the students using technology. Again, pretty similar to working in class, but what's a specific behavior-specific praise statement that you could give to those children? Go ahead and share in the chat now. Great, thanks for staying on task and not playing games, keeping your eyes on your own computer, working quietly and being respectful, concentrating on your assignment. Thank you for staying focused. Great job being responsible with your Chromebooks. I know sometimes students don't utilize Chromebooks correctly, so these are all awesome. I see you're using the computer appropriately. Thank you. So great job. You guys are doing an awesome job coming up with those behavior-specific praise statements. So I think you guys will be awesome actually utilizing these in the classroom. And I really like how you're varying your praise statements. So you're not just saying, great job doing this. I really like the thank yous and the I like how, and it's wonderful how you stayed on your assignment. So things like that are really helpful when you're varying those praise statements. So good job. All right. I'm not sure we'll have time for Mystery Motivator, but we'll go ahead and go through the PREMAC principle. So what is the PREMAC principle? The PREMAC principle is a reinforcement strategy that uses activities as positive reinforcement. So students are allowed to participate in a high probability activity, which is another word for something that the student prefers to do, as a consequence. And again, consequence is just that word that's used as a reward or what immediately follows their behavior for completing a low probability activity. So something that the student less prefers. So the goal with this is to use the high probability activity to increase the likelihood of the low probability behavior. So an example would be, you may go to recess after you complete your math problems. Other terminology for the PREMAC principle that may be more familiar is that it's sometimes called the grandmother's rule, where a grandmother might say, you may have dessert after you eat your Brussels sprouts. So it's really that first then strategy. So first you want the student to engage in that low probability or less preferred activity. And then once they participate in that, then they're allowed to participate in that high probability or something preferred. So a lot of times, like I know with the shift to virtual learning, a lot of times students are working on the computer. I know my students love specific games and videos. So we always use the PREMAC principle where first you complete your assignment on the computer, then you can play your game for 5 minutes. So setting that early on is helpful, and making sure they know that first they're engaging in that low probability activity and they will then get to receive that high probability activity. So we're going to go ahead and skip. Well, let me see how long this one is. So this is a good description of the PREMAC principle. So we'll go ahead and watch this video.
Very commonly used. And so today I want to talk about PREMAC principle. PREMAC principle is one of the positive reinforcement strategies that are very commonly used and many times very successful. You use high frequent behavior to reinforce the low frequent behavior. What that means, put it very simple way, is first, then rule. So the access to easier task will reinforce the child's engagement in more difficult, less preferred, or challenging task. It's sometimes also called as grandma's rule. So example would be eat your veggies first before you get your cookies. So this is a strategy that you can use very easily in your everyday life for anyone you're working with, you're at your house, in any time of the day, in any occasion. So for example, I have a 2-year-old daughter who is still in diapers, who also does not like to have her diaper changed. So I often use, let's change your diaper first and you get your snack. Or let's change your diaper first and you get to read your book. It's often very successful, but one thing that you want to be very careful about when using PREMAC principle is once you set the rule and inform the rule to your child, you want to stick with it. What that means is, for my same example with changing diaper and then reading her book. Just because she was very compliant when I set the rule and she lets me change her diapers doesn't mean that I can then add, okay, let's then clean your room and then you get to read your book. Or let's change your clothes and then you get to read the book. So you want to be consistent and follow through with the original rule that you presented, otherwise it defeats the purpose of the strategy. If you want to find out more about PREMAC principle or what exactly, how.
So again, the PREMAC principles, that first then rule, I really like in the video how she talks about how we don't want to then add things. We need to be consistent. I know I was guilty of that as a teacher. So you have the student working really hard on a task. You kind of want to then see what else you can get out of them. But with this, you want to make sure you're consistent. So when you set that expectation at the beginning of first you're completing this task, then you're getting that more preferred activity, you want to make sure you always follow through with that. So why use the PREMAC principle? Preferred activities are a type of secondary reinforcement. Activities are also very easily available in classroom settings to use as reinforcement. So it's just a good and powerful tool that you can use in the classroom. It's also very effective for a variety of students. Students all have activities and tasks and things that they are interested in. So this can be used across pretty much any student that you work with, including students with severe disabilities. And finally, how do we use it? So you'll first determine the contingency. So when you can use phrases like when you do this, then you do this, or first you do this, then you do this. So when you complete the math assignment, then you can read your Harry Potter book for 5 minutes, or first read 5 pages, and then you can have computer time. Students complete that less preferred activity first, and then participate in the more preferred activity. And teachers should also pair behavior-specific praise with the activity reward. So behavior-specific praise is very powerful. So you can use these kind of together. So when they complete that math assignment, you can say, great job. I love how you worked on that math assignment until you finished it. Now you can read your Harry Potter book for 5 minutes. So they know what the behavior that you are praising them for by giving them that more preferred activity. Students can also determine the sequence of less preferred and more preferred activities. So these are nice. You can kind of use like a visual schedule, or some students can kind of figure it out on their own, where they're like, first, if I do 1 or 2 tasks, then I get my more preferred activity. And that helps students to then, when you present another task, if they know something that more preferred is coming following that task, they are more likely to engage in those less preferred tasks before. And then some examples of things you can use as activity reinforcers. You could have the student lead a class activity, be a line leader, spend time on the computer, participate in self-stimulatory behavior. So I had a student who liked to pace. A lot of times it would be like, first sit and listen to the teacher. And then when the teacher's done talking, then you can get up and pace. So that can be very powerful. Play with games or toys, go visit another teacher or principal. That's one. I had a student who really liked our principal. So at the end of the day, if the student completed all of their tasks for that day, they went to see the principal, participate as a peer tutor, or have access to the gym. And finally, here's just some examples of simple visuals you can use for this strategy. So you could use what's called a first then chart. So first, what you want them to work on, then what they get to play with. Or as simple as first, then first sit, then you get your iPad. And then before I finish, I just want to leave a few tips and tricks for positive reinforcement. Make sure you're selecting powerful reinforcers. Like was shown at the beginning, reinforcement looks different for different individuals. So making sure you're selecting reinforcers that are powerful for that individual. Make sure you're using big enough reinforcers. Some students really aren't interested in stickers. So making sure that you have something that is big enough that the student wants to work for. Make sure you're delivering that reinforcer immediately following the behavior that you want to increase. Make sure you're assessing the student's preference early and often. A lot of times a reinforcer that's super powerful at the beginning of the school year is not as powerful to that student at the end of the school year. So making sure you're identifying them at the beginning of the school year, but you're also checking in to see what the student prefers and is interested in consistently throughout the school year so that you can change those as needed. Make sure that the reinforcement is something that's available only through you. So you want to make sure that it's not something the student is getting on their independently or on their own. It's something that you can actually give to the student. So that's why I kind of like the pre-MAC principle. The student wouldn't be able to really engage in that computer time unless you were actually giving them that time to engage in it. And make sure that you make them relevant to the student, like to their function. So making sure you're using reinforcers. So a lot of times, like with the pre-MAC principle, making sure you are using activities that are relevant to the student and the function of the behavior. So like, for instance, if the student has that self-stimulatory behavior that they really want to engage in, making sure you're using that as a reinforcer. All right. So if anyone has any questions, thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. You guys were awesome. And I really liked all of the feedback that you guys provided in the chat. If you have any further questions or would like anything from me, here is my email. So martin.4388@osu.edu. And again, thank you for your time today.